Hey, Dragon Slayers. It's been about 2 hours exactly since my last meal, and my blood glucose is 58. Yeah, pretty crazy. Now, part of that is because I put a new monitor in today, so there can be like a 15% or so margin of error. So I do think it's reading a little low. It's probably realistically somewhere in the low 70s, upper 60s. But man, this diet, as my audience can see, I've only been on it for 3 days now, and I've never had blood sugar this low. And I feel great, and I've never had ketones this high. I'm absolutely loving this diet. So the last thing that I had to eat was a 1 pound tuna steak, 1 pound tuna steak, and like an entire bushel of kale. So I'm going to get right into it. Got a lot to cover today. This is all about the definition of energy from a metabolic perspective. So, the title of his book, The PE Diet, refers to the amount of protein in your diet versus the amount of non protein energy or carbs and fats. I know this is a foreign concept to almost everyone on the planet, so I will start out with some background on what the heck we are talking about here. It's time to introduce you to the dietary concept of protein versus non protein energy. In order to set the stage, we are going to have to zoom out a little and start at the very beginning. I'm going to assume that almost everyone is at least a little familiar with the three basic macronutrients: protein, fat, and carbohydrates. But if you aren't totally familiar, don't worry, you will get up to speed fast. Let's get started as basic as it gets. Plants are autotrophs. That means that they make their own food. They use carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen, the three major elements of all life on Earth, from air and water, plus the energy from sunlight to make all of the food they need. They get nitrogen required for protein along with a dozen other necessary elements from the soil in mineral form. Animals, on the other hand, are heterotrophs. That means that all animals on Earth are only alive because they constantly eat other living organisms. Humans, of course, are animals. Like all animals, we are only alive because we eat other living things. This is just the way the system works. And if you are hoping to get by without constantly killing or living other living organisms to survive, well, then I would suggest you look into breatharianism. It's a dumb religion where people think they can only survive by breathing oxygen alone. I didn't create the system, so don't blame me. Because they can make food, plants are at the base of all animal nutrition on Earth. Make no mistake, they don't want to be. Plants want to live as much as any of us, and in fact, they have a host of complicated chemical defenses to avoid being eaten. But herbivores are essentially predators of plants, and carnivores are predators of herbivores. Plants just so happen to be the bottom rung of the ladder. Animals are divided into herbivores, eating plants, carnivores, eating animals, and omnivores, eating everything. The reality is that all animals are omnivores if they are hungry enough. They just have a strong preference for one or the other. All carnivores will eventually eat some plant matter, and all herbivores will eventually eat some animal matter. They just have a strong preference for one or the other. This is in contrast to a true omnivore, like a human, who will happily eat plants and animals. In all scenarios, plants are at the base of the food pyramid, and all animals are eating other living things to survive. Plants store energy, and they use carbon from the carbon dioxide in the air to store solar energy as high energy bonds between carbon molecules. These chains of carbons with high energy carbon carbon and carbon hydrogen bonds are either carbohydrates, that's a carbon carbon bond, or hydrocarbon, which is a carbon hydrogen bond, also known as fats. So hydrocarbons are also known as fats. Carbohydrates would include things like glucose, and they are water soluble, dissolve in water. Hydrocarbons are really just fats, and fats are not water soluble, sort of how oil and water don't mix. Anything on Earth that is capable of burning is at some very basic level either a carbohydrate or a hydrocarbon, which has been created by a plant. Burning is just another term for oxidation. You add oxygen to any carbohydrate or hydrocarbon and you release energy from the carbon carbon bonds. And the byproducts of the carbon dioxide, and the byproducts are carbon dioxide and water. So all dietary energy on Earth is either a carbohydrate or a fat that contains chains of carbons with high energy bonds made by plants using sunlight plus air and water for carbons and hydrogens. And all animals break apart these bonds in our mitochondria, the little energy plants in all of your cells, using hydrogen to oxidize or burn the carbs and fat and release energy, plus leftover carbon dioxide and water. You eat carbs and fats, you break apart the carbon carbon bonds in your mitochondria using oxygen that you breathe in. This gives you energy, plus the leftover carbon dioxide and water, which you exhale. So, this is what carbs and fats actually are: carbon carbon energy bonds created by plants as a way to store solar energy. We burn these in our cells to run our entire bodies 100% of the time. So there you go, guys. A lot of information. Go back and watch this video again. I know it's really dense. There's a lot of deep concepts that I'm trying to pack into a short amount of time, but don't forget to like and subscribe. That's what I have for you guys today. Stay tuned. There's so much more coming. And remember that together, you and I will slay the dreaded diabetes dragon.